The New York State Department of Transportation presents the DOT POD.
And welcome into the DOT-POD. I'm Josh Heller.
And I'm Anya Cardos.
And we are delighted to have you joining us for this very special episode of the DOT-POD. Well, back in January, Governor Hochul presented her executive budget, which outlined her vision for making New York a safer, healthier, and more affordable place to live, ultimately improving the quality of life for all residents of this wonderful state.
At the New York State Department of Transportation, our efforts are really focused on turning the governor's vision into a reality. But what does this mean for our vast transportation network and the people who use it? To help us unpack all of this, we are very honored to have our own Commissioner, Therese Dominguez, joining us right here in the DOT-POD studio. Welcome, Commissioner.
Thanks so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you all.
We have a ton to unpack, right? But first, for those who don't know you or know you well, can you kind of just go into your role here a little bit about yourself and your role so that folks who are listening can get an understanding of what you do here?
Sure. So I, first and foremost, I have the honor of serving as Commissioner of the State DOT. It really has been the honor of a lifetime for me personally. I've worked in transportation for close to 30 years now. I hate to admit that.
Time flies when you're having fun. Time flies when you're having fun.
I will say nothing more in terms of age or years, but long enough to say that I've been around transportation for a long time. I actually started my very first job coming out of law school was at the U.S. Department of Transportation, where I was there for a number of years. At various modes. I've worked in aviation. I have worked in water infrastructure with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I've worked in energy infrastructure and transportation, as well as hazmat at the federal level. So a lot of good sectors here, all of which come together very well for my work at New York State DOT. Why? Because we do a little bit of everything, right? Yeah. When it comes to transportation, we have all modes of transportation. So when you ask kind of what do, I have the pleasure of working with all the professional women and men here at DOT, from our operations teams across the state to our programmatic folks who literally work on everything from rail safety, aviation, transit. And importantly, a lot of people kind of, they know us for the road and bridge work that we do, which is incredibly important because obviously we operate, maintain, and do all of the work for 17,000 bridges that we have in the state. It's a huge inventory that we partner with our local governments on. But the bottom line is that we have an opportunity to really have a hand in every mode of transportation across the state. And we take that responsibility very seriously because that really truly is, when you talk about connectivity, when you talk about safety, transportation is something that I think a lot of people take for granted. They wake up every morning and they say, I'm going to get someplace, but then you got to think about how are you going to get to work, to school, to the healthcare appointment that you might have, or to access the outdoors, right? Do you want to bike? You want to get out there? You want to go hiking?
Touches our lives every day. Every day. And
it's something, you're right, you don't think about until you need to think about it. And that's when you realize, and I suppose one of our goals is, as an agency, is to not have people have to think about it.
Correct. You want to provide transportation for all. You want it to be fast, easy, accessible, affordable. And that's what we're all about. When you talk about what DOT is all about, we provide a safe, first and foremost, safe, affordable, accessible, reliable transportation system for all, for everybody, anyone who wants to move in and around the state of New York. That's our mission.
And it's a great mission, and it's certainly something that I know you're proud to be a part of. And Anya, I think I speak for you when I say we are as well. Certainly are as well. So let's dive into exactly why we're here today, and that's to learn more from you about Governor Hochul's executive budget. Now, the governor is dedicated to a vital mission, and that is championing our families by fostering safe, healthier, and more affordable communities across New York. The New York State Department of Transportation is instrumental, and we kind of talked about this already, but instrumental in turning this vision into a reality. And as such, the governor's budget is including an additional $1 billion, which is aimed at enhancing our department's purchasing power within the existing capital plan. So if you would, Commissioner, can you explain the implications that this has for communities throughout the state?
Absolutely. I mean, it's core to everything that we do as a department, but more importantly, it's core to the larger state of New York transportation system. So what the governor did, rather, in her budget proposal was put forward an additional $800 million to our capital plan. What does that do? It restores our purchasing power. As we've executed our plan coming out of COVID, we've seen price hikes in different areas, et cetera. The $800 million is to allow us to complete our 5-year capital plan that we started 3 years ago. That capital plan is literally the core of what our program is all about, in the sense that there are projects in every part of the state really getting at our assets, whether they're road and bridge assets or any kind of, sometimes we do work in villages that are truly remarkable and transformational. But it's really getting at all those elements, those programs, those projects that the legislature, based on information the DOT provides, based on our assets and our asset conditions, we provide information to the legislature. The legislature and the governor then at the end of, as they're crafting the 5-year capital plan, put together a list of projects. That's what we execute on over 5 years. Having $800 million allows us to get to over the next 2 years and really making sure that we can deliver everything in a timely way for all New Yorkers.
And it's quite an ambitious 5-year plan. I mean, I know we're talking about, the latter few years of it, but the entire 5-year plan is extremely large and ambitious set of projects that, we have the responsibility to undertake.
100%.
Right. Well, additionally to this, the governor's executive budget allocates $5.2 billion this year for essential highway and bridge initiatives, priority projects, engineering and maintenance. It also designates $1.3 billion in direct state aid to local governments for various highway and bridge projects. How do you believe that this will expand our reach, the department's reach, to hit those objectives across the state?
Well, there's a couple of things. So DOT, we execute our 5-year capital plan, but in addition to that, what the budget reflects is additional funding for a number of local programs that you just talked about. So there's everything from CHIPS to Marcaselli to extreme weather recovery, state touring routes. These are all programs and projects that it's aid to localities, literally, so that when the state goes about funding transportation, it's funding state DOT, but there's also funding available for municipalities, counties, local governments, et cetera, to take care of their roadways, because it's all a connected network. Right. So we want to make sure that there's that balance there. The governor did include, so there's $1 billion total that the governor put toward transportation, specifically New York State DOT, $800 million directly for New York State DOT, another $100 million in CHIPS, which is a local roads program, and then another $100 million specifically for additional transit opportunities.
And for some of these smaller, villages and towns and municipalities, I mean, these are lifelines. These are extremely important for them and for their residents, and are something that they count on.
They do indeed. That's why I think it's so important to make sure that one, we're not only good stewards of the dollars that we receive from the state government, but more importantly, that everybody understands that we're all part of a larger network, that the state, working along with municipalities and all of our other authorities across the state, whether that's, MTA or NFTA, who runs the transit system out in Buffalo, or RTS, the transit system, or Centro in Syracuse. The bottom line is that we all work together to make sure that there is that larger transportation network available.
We talk about connectivity, right? You mentioned that early on, and connectivity is, sure, our specific assets, but the assets that are in between those assets to get people from A to B. And so, yes, we have our responsibilities to take care of, but if everything else falls through the cracks, then it almost doesn't matter. It's a moot point. So we really need to work together as a team, and it looks like this is helping us do just that.
We do indeed. And what's fun about it is when you start to look at what some of the opportunities are, some of the things that New York State has done when we talk about kind of how that relationship and how we actually deliver for the state. I was talking about the investment that we're making in local roads and bridges through the CHIPS program and other programs, but we've also put a record amount of funding on the table for local governments to take advantage of in the form of Bridge of New York. Bridge of New York is a very unique program that New York State delivers on, but we do that in partnership with local governments. We've made over $1 billion available. Governor Hochul upped the amount that's being invested, so from $100 million every year to $200 million every year. Over a 5-year program, that went from $500 million in 5 years to $1 billion in 5 years, just for local bridges. And why is that important? Because our infrastructure is aging. The insert of huge amounts of transportation funding came in the Eisenhower era. And now we're seeing that a number of the roads and bridges that were built, specifically bridges that were built over the last, 75 years, are coming to the end of their service life. So it's important that the state invests both from the state assets, but also the local assets.
You were just talking about our aging infrastructure. That's something that we are grappling with here in New York State, connecting our communities. And a large focus of that is also on DOT's signature projects. I'm talking about the Cross Bronx Expressway, I-81 in Syracuse, and 787 in Albany. How will these projects contribute to Governor Hochul's overall vision for our state?
They're transformative. No executive has put as much dedicated funding, I think, in a very positive way, to fundamentally reconnect communities than Governor Hochul has. When you look at the work that New York State DOT has done over the last 5 years to reconnect communities across the state, it really is transformational. And the reason I'm using the word transformational is because if we start in the Bronx and we look at what we were doing at Hunts Point, what we did on the Sheridan and at Hunts Point, and now we're translating that into work on the Cross Bronx. The Cross Bronx is I-95. It is one of the most heavily used highways in America. And it moves people, it moves freight. It was built 75 years ago. The way that it was built, it literally just cut through the heart of the Bronx. So we have to do two things. One, we have to make sure that the infrastructure itself is still serviceable. We've got a 5 bridges project that those bridges need to be addressed. In addition to that, we've been working with the city of New York to look to see how we can fundamentally reimagine the Cross Bronx. And there's huge opportunity. But you have to start with studies. You have to start with engaging the community to understand what the larger vision can actually be. What this investment that Governor Hochul identified in the budget allows New York State DOT to do is now take that to the next level. We start the environmental process. We're going to do an environmental linkages study. That's basically a lot of work to help prepare for a larger EIS. When we do an environmental impact study, which is an EIS, that really does start to concretely put alternatives. What can we do? What will the future of the Cross Bronx actually look like? Why is this also important? Because it builds off a legacy of what the governor has already been investing in across the state of New York. So you mentioned I-81, the I-81 Viaduct project. Here in Albany, we're doing the Livingston Avenue Bridge, connecting Albany County and Rensselaer. And in Rochester, we've been working with the city on phase 2 now of the Inner Loop. There's just nothing quite like the transformational nature. There's no opportunity that we've had. And the IIJA was really instrumental in allowing us to tap into federal dollars to help supplement the state's investment in these transformational projects. Now, why is that so important? Why fundamentally is it so important? Because when you're able to do these transformational projects that reconnect communities, access different roadways for the citizens, one, you're addressing some of the planning mistakes of the past, but more importantly, you're driving an investment at a scale in a community that is very rarely seen. When we look at what's going on right now in Syracuse on the I-81 project, it's helping breathe life back into the city of Syracuse. Jobs are being created, businesses are being created. The hope of Micron. It has allowed for a whole bunch of investment to come into Central New York. And Central New York is being revitalized in a way that we haven't seen in a long time. Right. And it's very inspiring. That's the kind of thing that we can help drive through investment in transportation. So when you talk about jobs that are created, but more importantly, it allows the economy and local communities to really, really get that level of a boost. And so there's two projects that the governor put forward, and this is a very long answer, but there's two projects that the governor identified in her budget to begin that type of transformational investment. I mentioned the one on the Cross Bronx, and the second one is here, taking the 787 project to the next level, because that will be a game changer for our capital city.
I want to shift gears just a little bit for a moment. So we've talked about how the budget and Governor Hochul is helping with DOT, and we look at things through DOT color glasses. Why wouldn't we? But I want to take a step back and look a little bit more broader at her commitment to supporting families across New York. And, there's a proposed plan for free community college education for adults 25 to 55. Additionally, there's, money towards childcare for new mothers, various other initiatives designed to assist families. And these are families who, are workers right here at DOT. I mean, they're our lifeblood as well, the everyday New York families. Talk about how these efforts will benefit, taking a step back from DOT, but will benefit these employees and their families.
Well, one of the things that I think I found really exciting are two areas. One you mentioned in terms of investing in childcare, and also giving women time. When you're pregnant, what you really need is time to access healthcare. And oftentimes women have to balance, like, okay, I need to go to work. I need to be paid, right? With the health of themselves and their babies. And so the provision that the governor's provided in the budget allows women to not have to make those tough choices, that they literally will be compensated to make sure that they can take the time and invest in themselves and their future family. But another thing, just talking about our workforce here at DOT, is this provision for community colleges to waive tuition. This is a game changer. So a lot of folks that come to work at DOT get their associate's degree and then come in and, work with us. Those that are interested in pursuing their engineering degree then have the opportunity to actually go back to school. We provide a number of things. We're doing the fundamentals of engineering now for our engineers who are interested in getting their PE license. But to me, this is a critical building block. One, providing free access to community colleges. And we have such an amazing system here in New York State. Our SUNY system, our BOCES system, I mean, it's just unbelievable to have that available for people who basically are looking. Sometimes people, take a while to figure out what they want to do. That's age 25 is a minimum age, right?
Yeah.
But having that opportunity to come in, waive community college fees, and we want to make sure that at DOT we're showing them a way forward for careers in transportation. But I think this is truly a game changer when it comes to providing access to education and the hope for a transition into a job that becomes a career.
Well, let's go into public transit, because public transit is a great option for getting people around. It's better for our planet. it's cost effective, it's budget friendly. While speaking during the joint legislative budget hearing, you talked about how Governor Hochul is securing increased funding for public transit and supporting transit authorities across the state, which we do a lot. Maybe people don't know that. There are probably many people who don't understand that connection between DOT and public transit. Can you kind of shed more light on this, what we do, how we play a role in these kinds of initiatives that are helping our state realize Governor Hochul's vision for connecting people through public transit?
There's a couple different elements to all of that. So public transit can encompass bus service. It can encompass micromobility, right? If people have access to a bike program, scooters, transit on demand. There's all different types of transit, public transit that are available. And one of the things that we were highlighting in the budget was an investment to look at not only do we continue that level of investment, but work with the transit agencies, the non-MTA transit agencies across the state, because that's who DOT partners with. MTA runs the larger system for New York City and the surrounding region. Obviously, a lot of breadth there between Long Island Railroad, Metro North, and New York City Transit. But for all the communities that are outside that are serviced by non-MTA transit, there is great opportunity in investing for connectivity for people of all communities, whether you're on Long Island, you're in Syracuse, you're in Rochester. And the transit agencies are doing an incredible amount of really innovative work. I was in Rochester a few months ago. They've launched a new hydrogen fuel cell bus system. They're literally skipping past electrification and going right to hydrogen, right? It's exciting. But getting to zero emission, a number of our transit agencies and operators across the state are actually doing exactly that. The governor's investment in transit is reflective of that. How do we look at some of the other opportunities? Here in the Albany area, CDTA has looked at not only expanding their service, and they've widened their service market out to Montgomery County and some other places, but also looking at transit on demand. How do we make sure that we've got more what we call micro mobility options available? How do people actually want to access transportation? And investing in that level of opportunity is what the transit agencies are exploring across the board. We've got great people at DOT. They're the liaisons to all these transit agencies, our transit unit. And then rail. Rail is a whole other separate section, but very much tied to providing that level of service for people around the state. So one of the really exciting things that the governor put in her budget was an opportunity to invest in some critical projects, rail projects, a couple for MTA and a couple for DOT. Why? Because DOT, New York State DOT, we are the service provider, we're the operating partner for Amtrak here in the state. And one of the projects that we're looking at is how do you have that consistent, efficient one-seat ride in the Hudson Valley from Poughkeepsie into the city and back? And a couple of the projects that the governor has advanced in the budget are going to allow us to do things like add a second track at Croton-on-Hudson. Why? Because at Croton-on-Hudson, it's single-tracked right now, and you compete very heavily between passenger rail and freight rail. If we add a second track, we don't have that level of competition. That's what slows people down. What folks are looking for is the ability to make sure that they can, if they get on the train in Poughkeepsie, they can get to the city in 90 minutes, and it's reliable and fast. We've got a huge number of people moving up, and we want to make sure that we've got reliable train service to help them.
I want to talk about something real quick that I know is near and dear to your heart. Our dedicated workers, specifically those on the front lines. These are the people building, fixing, taking care of our roads and bridges, and yet they're facing increased incidents of harassment and violence and what's already inherently a job that they take risks for our safety seemingly has been getting riskier because of the actions of others. And in this budget, we're seeing ways that, the governor is trying to make things safer for our employees. One of the things is making the automated work zone speed enforcement pilot program permanent, new legislation to toughen penalties for attacks on transportation workers. We know how important these people are to all of us and to you. How important are these steps toward making sure that in their ability to keep us safe, we're keeping them safe?
It's everything. It really is. Look, our mission is to provide a safe transportation network. That requires people to do dangerous work. Our people, our state employees, but more importantly, our partners, our team members here at New York State DOT. Our folks work in the roadways and on bridges every single day. They put themselves in harm's way. It is incumbent upon us to keep them safe. So these provisions that the governor has put forward in her budget, one, to make the work zone speed camera program permanent, it's critical. Why? Because we've collected the data. The data shows people slow down at least by 10 miles per hour when you've got a camera in the work zone.
This is our program where we have cameras set up and signage set up, letting people know you're entering a work zone.
We want to eliminate speeding through the work zone.
And some of them have been pretty high, up almost 140 miles
Disturbingly
per
high.
hour.
Disturbingly high. We've seen speeds in the work zone at 141 miles an hour, 139 miles an hour. It's just completely unacceptable. And so the data's in. When we have cameras in work zones, people do slow down. Since the program has been implemented, we have not seen a fatality in those areas where cameras have been deployed. That's really important because we have to do everything we can to keep our own people safe. And people understand when you explain it to them that highway maintenance workers, bridge repair, folks are out there risking their lives to keep us safe. We have to do everything we can to keep them safe. And that's the message. That's what the governor is focused on. When you talk about a safer New York, that level of public safety across the board translates directly, keeping people safe.
The governor has also proposed legislation as well to protect our workers. Can you talk about that a little bit too?
Yes, there's a provision that she put forward. We've seen a lot, people are so distracted when they're driving and they're really focused, especially coming out of COVID, they're focused on everything except actually driving. So when they come up to a queue, right, we've got a flagger out in the roadway. They're taking out their frustration, whatever it is, on our highway maintenance workers. And people are using their vehicles as weapons. They'll come up unacceptably close to a flagger. They'll get out of their car. We have reported numerous incidents of people getting out, hitting, punching, kicking our folks, throwing hot coffee. They'll come up really close and kind of, reach over to their passenger seat and demonstrate that they've got a weapon. Just things that are intimidating. And one, it's completely disrespectful. But two, it's completely uncalled for. And it's a level of concern where, again, people are out there in dangerous circumstances, and you have to respect the work that they're doing. And this provision in law, it already exists. The protection for transit workers, for bus drivers, for crossing guards, for ferry workers. What we're asking is that the existing legislation be expanded to include highway maintenance workers. That would be DOT, state DOT, municipal workers as well across the state, our motor safety inspectors. We want these provisions to be expanded across the board, and that's what the governor put forward. I think it's more than time. I think it's necessary, and I really hope this gets passed.
Well, Commissioner, this has been incredibly engaging for us, and I'm sure for our listeners as well. But beyond that, as it always is, it's been a delight to have you here. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to spend time with both of you. You guys do a fabulous job on the DOT POD. Love it. Thank you.
Well, thank you again. And thanks to all our listeners for tuning in to this episode. You can reach out to us, podcast@dot.ny.gov. That's the easiest way, podcast@dot.ny.gov. So for Anya, I'm Josh. Until next time, we'll be right here on the DOT POD.